4.4 interactive assignment, objective 3. In this objective, we're just strictly going to use StatCrunch for this problem. It says, could it be that smoking actually increases survival rates among women? The accompanying data represent the 20-year survival status and smoking status of 1,336 women who participated in a 20-year cohort study. We're going to complete parts A through E. So, before we answer the questions, let's take a look at the table. So there's two tables here. We have our first table here that represents the smoking status. We have the first row represents the dead. The second row represents alive. And then the column is smokers with S, non-smoker, and S. Okay. So the question asks us, it says, what proportion of the smokers were dead after 20 years? And what proportion of the non-smokers were dead after 20 years? And what does this imply about the health of the consequences of smoking? Okay, so what we're going to do is we could actually create a marginal distribution with this table here so that we can find the total of the rows and the total of the columns. So we're going to go ahead and select Open in StatCrunch. Okay, and now what we want to do is we want to create a marginal distribution. So we're going to go to Tables, we're going to select Contingency, and then we're going to select With Summary. Okay, and then the columns that we're going to select are smoker and non-smoker, and the row variables is going to be variable 1. And we want to scroll down here, and we want to find both the row percent and the column percent. And I'm going to select Compute. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that here. So I'm going to copy this table into our next page. Okay, and so I'm going to go ahead and write down what each one represents. So in our first element here, so if we take a look at this first percentage here, that's taking 141 and then dividing it by the row total, which is 374, which gives us a decimal equivalent of 0.377, which then converts that to a percent. Same thing over here. If we take a look at this one here, if we take 233 divided by 374, and then it gives us that percentage. And then if we took 374 and then divide that by 374, then that's going to give us the 100%. Okay, likewise, if we take a look down here, if we take 454 and then divide it by the row total of 962, then that's going to give us that percentage. And then again, if we take 508, divide that by 962, that gives us that percentage. And then if we take 962, divide that by 962, that gives us 100%. Okay, and then the same thing here. If we take 595 and then divide it by the row total of 1336, it gives us that percentage. And then over here, if we take 741 and divide that by 1336, and it gives us that percentage. And again, 1336 divided by 1336 gives us the 100%. Okay, now let's take a look at the column totals. So the column totals is this here. So we would take 141, that's in the element, and then we would divide it by the column total of 595, which then would give us that percentage, 23.7%. Same thing here. If I take 233 and then I divide it by the 741, that's going to give me that percentage. And then over here, if I take 374 and I divide it by the column total of 1336, then it gives me that percentage. Let's take a look down here. If I take 454 and then I divide it by 595, the column total, it's going to give me that percentage. Again, 508 divided by the column total of 741 gives me that percentage. And then over here, 962 divided by the column total of 1336 gives me that. And then down here, okay, and just let me make sure this all represents that color. So we got 595 divided by 595. And then over here, we would take 741 divided by 741, which gives us the 100%. And this one is 1336 divided by 1336, which gives us the 100%. Okay, now the question is asking us, what proportion of the smokers were dead after 20 years? Okay, so what we're looking for is the following. Okay, we're looking for the smokers that were dead after 20 years. So that means we're taking the column, okay, of smokers, which is the total here. So that means what we're going to do is we're taking the value of 141 and then dividing it by the column total of 595. So if I do this on the calculator, 141 divided by 595 to 4 decimal places is 0.2369. And if we round it to 3 decimal places, we get 0.237, which is what you get down here for 23.7%. So putting in our answer, 0.237. Let's check our answer, and there is our answer. Okay, now it says, what proportion of non-smokers were dead after 20 years? Okay, so what proportion were, again, it says non-smokers were dead after 20 years. So, again, we're looking at non-smokers that were dead. So we want to find the non-smokers out of the total in that column. Okay, so what we're going to do, again, is take the following value. Well, we know that there's 233, and we're going to divide the column total of 741. And again, you can see that's going to be this number here. So let's just verify this. If you take 233 divided by 741, round it to 4 decimal places, 0.3144, which is 0.314, and you can see it's this percentage here. So therefore, our answer for the second part is 0.314. Okay, now it says, what does this imply about the health consequences of smoking? Well, it does imply that it is healthier to smoke according to this information. Okay, now the next question says, the data in the first table do not take into account a variable that is strongly related to survival status, age. It says the data shown in the second table give the survival status of women and their age at the beginning of the study. So for example, if we take a look at this data here, okay, all right, it says here that 14 women who were 35 to 44. Okay, so for 35 to 44, there were 14 women here. Okay, and it says that who were aged 35 to 40 at the beginning of the study were smokers and dead after 20 years. Okay, and what we want to do is we want to be able to determine the proportion of 18 to 24-year-old smokers who were dead after 20 years. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this table, and I want to use this table here. And you can see that we have a row that represents dead and a row that represents alive. And then we have our age groups. So I'm going to copy this here, okay, because we're going to need this if we want to use StatCrunch, okay, and I'll show you what I mean here. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I can open up StatCrunch, or I can just open up a generic table if I wanted to, but I'm going to go ahead and open this up in a StatCrunch for this data here, okay. And then what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to create this table to answer these questions, because you can see here, and I'm going to show you what I mean. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to now generate these columns, okay, and these rows. So I can't use this information to gather what I need for the information that we need. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create two new rows over here. One of them is going to be called dead, just like it is here. And then the next row is going to be alive. Okay. And then you see here it says 18 to 24. We have a column that represents smokers and a column that represents non-smokers. So up here I'm going to put in 18 to 24 and I'm going to put S because that represents the column for smokers. And I'm going to put in the number 3 and then 53, and you can see that I'm getting it from here. And then again I'm going to put in 18 to 24 non-smokers, and then again I'm going to put in the value 2 and then 63. So I have 2 and then 63. Okay, as I continue to the next one, the next one's going to have another 2 columns for 25, 34. So I'm going to put in 25 to 34, again that's smokers, and I'm going to put in the number 33 and then 124. And then I'm going to put in 25 to 34, and again that's non-smokers. And then I'm going to put in 5 and then 152. Okay, and so then I'm going to put 2 more in, and I'm going to fill it in before we come back. So again, what do you think the next 2 columns are going to be? Well, it's going to be 35 to 44. The first one represents smokers. Sorry, so we have S, and then we're going to put in 14 and then 97, and the next one's going to be 35 to 44 and then non-smokers, and I'm going to put in 7 and then 114. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and put in the rest. Okay, so now I've filled in the rest over here. Okay, and so let's go ahead and scroll down a little further here, and let's take a look at our question. Okay, the question says we want to find the proportion of 18 to 24-year-old smokers who were dead after 20 years. So all we're doing is we're just focusing on this column here, which is this column, okay? And then we want to determine, the smokers, non-smokers, smokers, non-smokers, and so on, right? But we also need the total for the alive here. So what's going to happen is that for the smokers, and I'm going to show you how we would do this by hand and how we're going to read it off the table. Okay, so for the smokers, you see that we have 3. Okay, so you're going to have this 3, and then you got to divide it by the total of 53 plus 3, which is the column total, which becomes 56. So that's going to be 3 over 56, and we're going to figure out what that decimal is soon here. Okay, and then over here, we're going to do the same thing. It says, what is the proportion of 18 to 24-year-old non-smokers? So the first one was smokers, now it's 18 to 24 non-smokers. Well, we can see that represents the number 2, and then we're going to divide it by the total of 63 plus 2, which is equal to 65. Okay, so let's just see what this decimal is. So if I take this 3 divided by 56, it's going to give me 0.0535, 0.0535, rounding it to 3 decimal places gives us 0.054. And then if we take the next one here, 2 divided by 65 gives us 4 decimal places, 0.0307, 0.0307, rounding it to 3 decimal places gives us 0.031. Now, how would we generate this using StatCrunch? Well, we're going to come in here. Okay, we're going to open this up into StatCrunch. And so now what we're going to want to do is we want to create, since we want to find the total of the columns, we want to make this into a conditional distribution. So a conditional distribution is basically taking the number and dividing it by the column total. So we're going to go to Tables, select Contingency, and then with Summary. And then what we're going to do is we're going to select the columns that we created. So we have 18 to 24, and then I'm going to select all of them all the way down to this one that we created here. And then the row labels is going to be the column that we created, which is variable 6, which says dead or alive. So we're going to go to variable 6. Okay, and now what we want to be able to do is we want the column percent. That's all we want for this question. We don't want to deal with the row percent because then we're going to have a lot of numbers that are there. So therefore, now we're just going to select compute, and now let's take a look at this display, and then we're going to copy this display so you can see how we got this result. Okay, so taking a look at this display, right? So just like we did up over here, show you how we did this. We end up getting, okay, so the question for 18 to 24-year-old smokers who were dead after 20 years. Well, 18 to 24 is 3 divided by the total of 56, which gave us 5.36%, which is the same thing as this one here to 3 decimal places, right? Because that's going to be 0.054 when you round that to 3 decimal places. So let me show you what I mean by that. All right, so if this percentage is 5.36%, if we convert this to a decimal, we move this over twice, which gives us 0.0536. And if we round that to 3 decimal places, we get 0.054. Okay, likewise, now we're going to look at the next to the right. Okay, we do not use this row at all because we're not concerned with the alive row. We're only concerned with the dead because that's what it's asking us. So if we're looking for now the proportion of 18 to 24-year-old non-smokers who were dead, well, here we are. There it is, right there. And we know that it's 2 out of the 65, which is this percentage here. So if I take a look at that, okay, so recall that that is 3.08%. If we convert that to a decimal, it becomes 0.0308. And if we round that to 3 decimal places, we get 0.031, which is what we get over here. Now, let's go ahead and answer our question. So if we come in here and then answer our question, okay, it's asking us to say, okay, what is the proportion of 18 to 24-year-old smokers who were dead after 20 years? Well, we got that here, which is what? 0.054. So 0.054, let's check our result, and there's our answer. And then it says, what is the proportion of 18 to 24-year-old non-smokers who were dead after 20 years? In this case, we got 0.031. So that's 0.031, and then let's check our answer, and there's our problem. Now we need to put in the rest of the table because it's saying we want to create a conditional distribution. So the number that we got here first was 0.054. That's going to go here, 0.054. And then for non-smokers, it's the number next, which is 0.031, which is going to go here, 0.031. Okay, so now let me go ahead and copy this table that we need to fill out so you know how to fill this out on your question here. Okay, so let me go ahead and do that over here. All right, so, okay, we are looking for, again, the 25 to 34 smoker. And so the percentage is 2.36%. Okay, as a decimal, this is 0.0236. Rounded to 3 decimal places is 0.27. So what's going to go in here is 0.027. Okay, and then now we need to take a look at the 25 to 34. Okay, non-smokers. So we're looking at this percent here. Okay, so below that, I'm going to go ahead and show you how we get that result again. So we're looking at the percentage of 3.18%. As a decimal, this is 0.0318. Okay, and if we round this to 3 decimal places, we end up getting 0.032. So that's 0.032. Okay, let me do one more and then I'll fill in the rest of the table. So again, what we're going to do is now we're looking at 35 to 44 smoker. So this is 35 to 44 smoker, and that percentage is 12.61%. So since we have 12.61%, if we convert that to a decimal, 0.1261, rounding it to 3 decimal places is 0.126, and that goes here, 0.126. Okay, next, we now want to take a look at the next 35 to 44 non-smokers, which is the percentage of 5.79%. Okay, so again, if we take that value of that percent, which is 5.79%, okay, converting that to a decimal is 0.0579. Rounding it to 3 decimal places is 0.58. So that's going to go here, 0.058. Okay, and then I'll do one more here for 45 to 44 so that we can see a clear picture here. So again, 45 to 54 smoker is 20.3%. So 20.3% converted to a decimal is 0.203, which gives us this value, 0.203. And then again, if we want to find the 45 to 54 non-smokers, which is 15%, then we're going to take a look at the following percentage. We have 15%. Converting it to a decimal is 0.150, so that's 0.150. Now I'm going to go ahead and fill in the rest. Okay, so now that I've finished in remaining values here, then I put the values into my question. So I'm just making sure that this all matches. Okay, so I have, let's see here, 0.054, 0.027. You can see here that it matches those values going across there. And then down here, it also matches those values over here. And now hopefully I rounded everything correctly, but it's always possible that I may not have, and I might have to make a correction. Let's go ahead and do that. Well, it looks like there is an incorrect rounding there. So let's take a look here. So if we take a look over here, like, oh, wait a minute. I think I might have made an error here. So let's take a look. So here is my error, which is here. Okay. So what happens is now I need to look at how I rounded this one here. And so I need to change that value. So that represents, rounding it to 3 decimal places is 0.024. So this should be 0.024. So if we need to change that, we're just going to come back in here. Oops, wrong one. Okay, so we need to make sure that this says 0.024. Now again, with all these numbers, yeah, it's going to happen where you might make, a possible error here. So again, let's take a look and verify all our values. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so we have 0.126, 0.203, 0.441, 0.734, and then 1. And then if we look here, 0.32. Now let's check our answer. Okay, well, looks like we still have another one. So let's take a look. So as you can see here, I copied this number down wrong. And again, it's going to happen. So it's going to happen putting these numbers down incorrectly. So I need to change this one right here and this one here. So again, let's go ahead and put this down. So this should be 78.38%, which becomes 0.7838, which run into 4 decimal places is 0.784. So this would be 0.784. So let's go ahead and make sure that it's correct in our problem. So 0.784, okay, and then all the other ones should be okay, and so hopefully, keeping our fingers crossed, we can final check, and there is our result. So again, you're going to have certain problems where they may be incorrect, okay. Now the next thing that we want to do is we want to generate and draw a bar graph of the conditional distribution. So again, we're going to use StatCrunch, and we need to create a new column, okay, and so 2 new columns over here to the right. So we're going to go ahead over here, and what we're going to do is we're going to create these columns with the information that we just put into our set here. So we're going to use these numbers here. So let me put this up higher a little here. And so now what we want to do is we're going to create a new column, which is going to represent this row where it says smoker. So let's put that in here. So we have smoker. And then we're going to put in all of these values in here in this column. So 0.054, 0.024, 0.126, 0.203, 0.441, 0.784, and then 1. And then we're going to create another column that represents that row, which is non-smoker. And then let's go ahead and put those values in: 0.031, 0.032, 0.058, 0.150, 0.336, 0.783, and then 1. Okay, and now what we want to be able to do, according to this question, okay, is we want to figure out, we want to create a vertical bar, right? We want to create a bar graph that represents this conditional distribution. So what we want to do is we're going to come in here, we're going to select over to our right, we're going to select graph, and then we're going to select chart, and then we're going to select columns. Okay, so what are the columns that we wanted to put in here? Well, the 2 that we just created, which is smoker and then non-smoker. Okay, and then what we want to do is now we want to come down here, and then you see where it says row labels in. Well, the row labels in is going to represent the age group. So we're going to select age group here. And then the last thing we want to do is select the vertical bars split. So now I'm going to go ahead and select compute. And then here is my bar graph that represents those vertical bars split. So now we want to take a look at this graph and decide, okay, which one does this represent? So if we take a look at this one here, down here, this doesn't represent the same graph. It looks like it's going to be B because you can see it's comparable in all of them. And over here, it's not C, so we're going to select B. And then checking our answer, it is correct. Okay, and then it says, state the appropriate conclusion and choose the correct answer. It says in almost all of the age groups, smokers had a lower death rate than non-smokers. Okay, now remember, smoker is in blue. So this one's high, this one's low, high, high, high. So there's 3 of them that are high. There's 1 of them that's low, 4 of them that are higher. And then this one is lower, and then these 2 are the same. So in all age groups, in almost all age groups, it's saying smokers had a lower death rate than non-smokers, or in all age groups, smoker had a lower death rate than non-smokers. And so our correct choice is going to be D, because it's saying that in almost all age groups, smokers had a higher death rate than the non-smokers, in almost all of them. And therefore that answers our question using StatCrunch.